Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Teacher Development Webinars. Teacher Development Webinars is a social action project to support teachers and educators around the world with professional development opportunities. It is an initiative using the rise in online professional development to connect people from around the world with opportunities which they may not have had due to the old normal of face-to-face conferences. My name is Amanullah Sand, and I facilitate virtual programs at Teacher Development Webinars. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And for this webinar, without wasting much time, it's my pleasure to introduce Marjorie Rosenberg. Marjorie Rosenberg has been working in the tertiary sector in adult education and with teachers since 1981 when she moved from New York City to Graz, Austria. She's an active presenter and has given plenaries and workshops around the globe. Her publications include a number of course books for schools, a business English course book, exam materials, and several methodology course books. Marjorie served as a chair of Teachers of English in Austria, coordinator of IITFL Business English Special Interest Group, and as IITFL president. It's a pleasure to have you at Teacher Development Webinars. Marjorie, welcome to Teacher Development Webinars.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm trying to see this. Okay. Share. Okay. Okay, so can everyone hear me?
Perfect.
Yes, good. Okay, I just need to move that out of the way. Great. So good morning, everyone from Austria. It's 11 a.m. here. I see people of different time zones around the world, and we're going to look at ways to grow as a teacher, which means stepping outside of our comfort zones. What happens to many of us, okay, just a moment, okay, sorry, is that very often we find ourselves in our own little worlds. We go to class, we teach, especially in adult education or for freelancers, we may never see others. There may be no staff room. We don't have the chance to share ideas with colleagues. And this is the importance of teacher associations, is that we get to talk to people who are in the same situations we are in. So finding out about you, you can put this in the chat. How long have you been teaching? How many have been for 1 to 5 years, or 6 to 15, 16 to 30, or 31 plus? So I can't see the chat. So if you see any information here, you can share it with me.
Sure. Gunil says 6 to 5, 15, and Fernando says 40 plus, and
wow.
Venikata says 5 years, and Pema says 11 years, Pinar says 16 to 30, Nayab says 6 to 15,
okay.
Shiva says 16 to 30.
So a wide range.
Wide range.
Very wide range. So congratulations to all of those who are entering the field, and congratulations for those who are still at it after 31 years. I've been now teaching in Austria for 40 and still have some classes. And how often do you get to try something new? With going online, many of us tried something new probably every day or every time we had a class. But we don't always have that chance. Sometimes people do it once a month, sometimes twice a month, or sometimes they don't really get to try new things out. And there are lots of reasons for that. And these were ideas that came up. I did crowdsourcing for the first time I held this talk. And these were the things that teachers told me that stopped them from growing themselves and from trying new things out. They were afraid it wouldn't work. We all know that. Or there was just no time. You have a curriculum to do, you have to get through it, or you're teaching for a test, and that's the most important thing. No chance to do it. Some people said they simply weren't interested. Although in a research project I did on the subject, That was the lowest, which was very good to see. Lack of funds. There's not always the money to do something. Or no motivation. If things are working fine, you think, why should I take the time to put in and try something that may not work? Or no support from others. This can happen in many systems, from your boss, from colleagues. People say, no, I don't want to do that. Or if you're in school, from parents, or not knowing where to start. So in order to look at who we are, I thought it was important to define us. And I think as teachers, we live our jobs. I know very few teachers who don't identify with their profession as part of their own personality. We generally like to be around people. That's why we went into the field. And we know how to listen to others. We facilitate learning. We can't actually make someone learn, but we can facilitate how they do it. And we keep learning ourselves. That's why teacher development webinars are an important part of what we do. We experiment, we try things out. We also can meet challenges, as we've seen since COVID hit us back in March of 2020. All of us have risen to the challenge. We have empathy for students. We really understand where they're coming from. We love finding out about new things, and we're also coaches in many ways. We coach people through the learning process. So I'm not going to read this for you. We'll see if this sounds familiar to anyone. This is given to me by a colleague who was a primary school teacher and just retired after years and years of teaching. And I think this is quite true for many of us. Many of us have to implement curriculum, fill in forms, raising funds, absolutely, writing reports, petty cash clerk, so keeping track of money when you have to collect it for a school trip, being a surrogate parent. Walking Encyclopedia goes through all levels of teaching. And I learned very quickly to say, I don't know that, but I'll look it up and let you know. And Code Finder is something that can happen even in adult education. So, but you can just call me a teacher. So, have you actually asked yourself what you can do to grow and step out of your comfort zone? And how can we get there? That's an important thing. So we might be on a superhighway to getting out of our comfort zone and growing. We might be on a country road going under an underpass. We might be on a road that has certain, trying to think of the English word for this, barriers in the way. Something that we have to stop. Might cause us to look around and consider why we can't go ahead. Or we may find that there are two roads leading to exactly the same place, and it doesn't matter which one we take because both of them will get us there. So what we're going to look at today are new methods, new subjects, new technology, CPD, which is continuing professional development, our learning styles, our colleagues, our PLN, which is our personal learning network, and new areas of ELT. And in order to put this together, I did some crowdsourcing and asked people if they had expanded into any of these areas, where had they grown as teachers? And I had answers from people around the globe. These were all people who answered these questions and gave me their ideas. So let's start with new methods. I put this one here because this was a lovely photo of dice in a language I can't read. And many of us have experimented. There's all kinds of dice on the market. I have a set of business English dice, which you can use in games when you have face-to-face, or you could do it online. You roll the dice and whatever subject comes up is what's discussed. Or you use them in board games, or you can use them to create debates. I use them where we choose a topic. I live in Austria. Skiing is very popular. So we took skiing. And if you rolled a 1, a 3, or a 5, you had to give positive things about skiing. If you rolled 2, 4, 6, you had to give negative, and you couldn't repeat anything. And when it came to a number, for example, a 6, somebody who loves to go skiing, they suddenly had to think outside the box. They had to think of the other side and came up with the reasons that maybe skiing wasn't the perfect way to spend the weekend. But it makes them think, it makes them look at both sides of an argument. So these were ideas that people came up with using a riddle, or students write a paragraph from a Shakespeare play, or asking university students to actually create their own revision package and sharing their work. I did this long before we went online. I did it on Moodle. I had my students write what they thought was going to be the exam questions. I gave them the topics, and I gave them the types of tasks that they would have, gap text or multiple choice, true, false, and said, okay, I want you to imagine you are putting the exam together for others. And they went home, they worked on this, they worked in groups, and then they came back and they gave each other the exam questions and corrected them, which meant that they reviewed by writing the questions and others reviewed by taking the exam. Using unplugged teaching, so no books, using theater techniques, trying things out, seeing how things go, or using total physical response, which is speaking to students in a language they don't yet know very well and having them respond. This was very popular for a while in the US. It works in many ways, especially at the beginning of a language. So saying stand up, and they understand the command and they do it. Okay, so some ideas that I've had: using cooperative learning groups, which are interdependent. In a cooperative learning group, each person must contribute. You cannot have somebody hitchhiking, as we call it, so somebody sitting back while everyone else does the work. Each person has one of the missing pieces of information, or each person has something that they've read that no one else has read, and they have to contribute. And what this does is it brings the groups together. So a lower level learner, somebody who's maybe not as advanced as others in the group, still can contribute because they have information the others need and the others help them. Using project work, and they report back. Art and music, asking them to collect information, send them off to research something. For example, we don't celebrate Halloween in Austria, but Austria had some of the earliest Celtic civilizations. So saying, go and look up the information on this. Where did they live? What did they do? And have them come back and tell each other. Or use a poem as a basis for a lesson. Or create these lovely puppets or dolls. Okay, so new subjects. This was one of my favorites. I taught nutrition students who also learned cooking and waiting on tables and so on for a particular school in Austria, or a university actually, who then taught students how to do this. It's a profession. And we spent about a month preparing the Thanksgiving lesson. So we went through the vocabulary, the history, how it's done in the United States, and then we spent an afternoon or morning in the kitchen preparing Thanksgiving. And I learned as much from them, because they're the experts at cooking, as they learned from me. But they had to do all the recipes in English. They had to follow the instructions, and we discussed it. And then we served the meal to others at the school. It was great. So Sue teaches in Jersey, in island off the coast, the UK. She gets new classes all the time. She's worked with all kinds of people and finds out what they need and then negotiates how they want to work. And I love her comment, if you look interested, it usually turns out okay. I've also worked with a variety of students. I think my most unusual group was a group that watches the closed circuit TVs in the tunnels in Austria that go through the mountains. And I had no idea what language they needed, but they needed to respond if somebody had a problem in the tunnel. So you have to work with them to find out what they want. Emma started a course online with 10 Iraqi men who wanted to practice English and sent them, they sent her the topics they wanted to work on, and then she developed the lesson from that. So that was a new subject for her. Whatever they came up with, she created a lesson around it. So if you're looking for ideas, teach something besides English. If you have another thing you're interested in, it could be anything: dance, music, the arts, a sport. I was very lucky to have an athlete in one of my university classes who competed in the Olympics in Britain and is now a coach. And having her in class and talk about a little bit about what she did was fascinating, and helping her with the vocabulary, and the others learn from her or expand into another area. Finding articles about these topics, collecting information from learners. We often did presentations. I did Pechakuchas, which is only 20 seconds per slide. Normally there are 20 slides, but I cut it down to 10. And I had my students do the presentation on something they were interested in. And the advantage of this is Pechakuchas are mostly images. So you have students who have to speak freely. They don't read from the slides. And because it was a topic they were interested in, they did the research and the others were interested. The difference between these presentations and other student presentations for me was that I did not have students looking at their phones while others were speaking. One of them gave a fantastic talk on the race across, I think it was the race across America, where Austrians were competing at the moment. So he was able to talk about something going on in real time. Okay, so using new technology, I think we've all discovered that. Anyone who didn't know Zoom 2 years ago is now very familiar with it. And Elena in Russia said she uses Prezi and taught her students, uses Vocaroo, and tried out MentorMob. And Sergio said he uses his iPad. There was a question recently in the Business English Special Interest Group, the Facebook group, on which apps people are using. And this is something that some of our students are experimenting. One of mine asked me if I knew an app that he could use. I sent him a bunch of ideas, and then he found one on his own, which met his needs. That's the important thing. So whatever you use, I'm using Memrise myself to learn a third language. But it's important that it's something that the students find helpful. Bitstrips, which is something for young learners, creating cartoons, or using a wiki, which can be similar to something with Moodle. And many teachers at universities use these. So learning how to use a learning management system. When I started at university and we were told we had to use Moodle, it seemed overwhelming until I discovered how it helped me and my students. I could put in all the information about what we did in class. So those who missed class just needed to look at the Moodle page. Put in the information about what they needed for the next time. I could upload links, and it became our way to communicate outside of class. Finding videos, very helpful. Breakout rooms, individual chats, whole class chats. If you're online, replicating your classroom. When my group of adults went online, at the beginning, it was very challenging because I had never taught online. And it turned out we were able to replicate our classroom. I have a small group of adults at a company, and I'm able to teach with them very much the way I do in the classroom. And I use the chat box as my whiteboard, and then they save it instead of keeping the pages from the flip chart that we used in class. Discovering the apps or the wiki. Okay, so CPD, this is, of course, from a conference, which I know many of us are hoping will become face-to-face again soon, but in the meantime, we've had some pretty successful and fascinating online conferences. And these are things that people have done. Lots of going on to get various diplomas, Cert IBET, Cert TESOL, DIP TESOL, or the TKT done by Cambridge and the TTC, and working with others and giving feedback. And as Sandy said, most of it online, blogging, social media. I read something and try it out. There are many, many active Facebook groups for teachers today. I mentioned the IATFL Business English one, which is the one I'm most active in. And we share ideas. Does anyone have an idea for teaching this subject or this topic? And lots of people respond. Tweeting, again, social media, webinars, blogs, and so on. Taking online courses. This was something Dana did to actually learn to integrate leadership training in the business English classes, or teaching students with hearing impairments, which is another very important field. I have a couple of colleagues doing this, or going back to university and doing a master's, doing a CELTA, another one with an MA, attending webinars and web conferences. Of course, you're doing this. This is you're growing by being here. Setting up training sessions with colleagues. Why not set up something like a swap shop? Say, okay, next Monday, we're going to meet online. Everyone bring one idea. And you share your ideas. We actually did this at the last IATFL BASIC conference we had in person in Berlin. We ran swap shops and people showed up with some pretty amazing ideas. Taking part in online university courses or using social media for professional purposes, which I believe many of us are doing more and more. Blogs, not only reading them, but starting your own makes you really reflect. Learning about teacher wellness. This is a newish subject, and my colleague Sarah Mercer has been very active in it. It's come up with a few books. It's something we need very carefully to look at. And one thing that's happened with moving online is we've become more available. So there are times when we really have to say, I'm sorry, Sunday's my day off, or Saturday's my day off, or Friday's my day off, a day that, no, we are not available for the world. The other times, yes, very happy to help, but we need to look at what we need as well. And looking at Carol Dweck's ideas about mindsets. Mindsets can either be limiting when they're closed, saying, yes, but I wasn't born to use technology, or I wasn't born to learn another language. We need to learn to have an open mindset and say, why not? Let me try it out. I can certainly try to do this. I never thought I would learn a second language. And I did learn a second language, and now I'm working on a third language. There's no reason, there's nothing that stops us from trying. So stretching out of our learning style, this photo is from a science park to teach students how to understand very abstract ideas of physics through actual physical things, to get them to understand it through their bodies, which is taking something that's more abstract and making it more tangible. And Alex says that she is very visual, but started doing more kinesthetic things with students. And Dana says she tries to use her auditory style, which is her least preferred one. It's the same for me. I have a much harder time reproducing pronunciation, for example, in a new language. And I have to really work on my auditory skills. Or learning to do things that are computer-based, instead of working with paper, for example, becoming more hands-on. So an important thing to remember is we generally teach the way we learn, so it's important to try something new, to stretch out of that comfort zone and to grow. Make use of listening. I did very few listening comprehensions because I'm not very auditory, and I learned to use them more and more, or pictures, or emotions, or movement. Look for things that are both detailed and those with overviews. Those of us who like an overview forget that others need the details, and vice versa. Take a chance on a new activity. Tell the students, this is new. Let's see how it works. Sometimes it doesn't. And okay, we tried. There's nothing wrong with failure. It's not actually failure. We call it feedback. So colleagues are extremely important. Antonio said he trained colleagues how to do concept work, how to get the actual information into questions, or teaching an inductive approach. And Bea said she started this creative cafe idea. People get together to talk about different topics and they present to each other. I think it's a brilliant idea for a teacher association. Let's make use of all that knowledge that we have among our colleagues. Sergio, socializing, and I think he's on his 4th or 5th language now, always on the move. And as he says, I believe the human or social side of our profession is vital. And he focuses on social interaction. So collaborate, ask colleagues what works. I have it's a drawing that I now, of course, have digitalized that a colleague gave me probably 35 years ago at the end of a class. She handed me a piece of paper and said, I did this today. It was a lot of fun. It was a back-to-back drawing and they had to describe this to each other. I still use it and my students love it every time. Or take part in a colleague's online class. It's much easier now that we're online. Just say, can I come along and watch you? Meet up regularly if you can. I'm meeting a colleague this afternoon for a walk, and we always exchange ideas. And the last time I saw her, I cleaned out my office. May not look like it, looking at the background, but there was more. And I gave her a lot of stuff that I'm not using any longer, and she was thrilled to have. Or take turns with a colleague to teach each other something new. Our PLNs are very important. These are these professional learning network, which are personal learning network. We have different names for it. And this was something put together by Rosalie of her PLN. And it's people from around the world. You may recognize some. So Omid said he stayed in touch with people from the training courses. And Tanya says she loves the conferences. And what I really enjoyed about some of the ones I've been to was the fact that there was a lot of social interaction. There were even break times, where we could go into break rooms or connect with somebody online and chat. So join and contribute to these groups. Get active in whatever teacher association is in your area. And stay in touch with people. This has become even more important now that so many of us are at home. Or help others with your expertise. When the lockdowns began in Austria, probably around, well, it was March of 2020. So around April, I think, I started a group on Facebook called Staying Positive. And we were able to have 2 online meetups. I know some of the people personally, others I don't know, but it was wonderful to see this group of people come together and get to actually meet each other through Zoom. And then the PLN at the 50th conference at IATEFL, people from 4 or 5 countries here, which is also wonderful. So moving into a new area of ELT, I like this one because I've asked people who speak the languages that this was originally written in and have a look at the English, which is a very interesting translation. And my suggestion here, it's what I did in Graz, we had some English announcements on our public transport, which had very strange translations. And I mentioned this to somebody who was in the position to hire me to redo the translations and record them. So people who take the tram here now hear my translations along with my voice on the tram or on the buses. So you never know where there's some work for you. You might see something in a brochure from your town or from an organization and say, or a restaurant menu and say, this translation's a little strange. Would you like some help? And then you might find yourself with a new job. So people go into things like course coordinating or obviously online teaching, being a director of studies, or going into translating, consecutive interpreting, very hard job. Copy editing, it's another new area. A lot of my colleagues are moving into these. Working on CLIL, so content language integrated learning. Teaching subjects in English, also called English as a medium of instruction. Or becoming part of an online team, being a moderator for the ELT chat, which I'm going to discuss, being a dose or a CELTA trainer, writing an ebook, learning how to self-publish, or being in charge of a special needs department, very new topic for Teresa. Coaching, writing a fiction book, and as Alex said, what was I thinking? But something is a real learning experience, taking part in the Pechakucha evening at Untitled, which is how we met because I was so impressed by her Pechakucha. So lots and lots of things you can do to stretch out of where you are and to grow. Becoming a tutor and exchange programs in the days when we could take students abroad. Okay. Publishing an EAP textbook, whole new area. Starting your own online magazine. There's another new area. The EFL Talks, if any of you have been involved, started by Rob Howard. They are 10 slides, 10 minutes per person, and Rob does many, many different topics and runs them a number of times a year. Absolutely great opportunity. Or starting an ELT video production company, as Vicki did. Okay, so these are things you can do. You can try writing or contributing to publications. Work on changing classroom curriculum to online lessons, maybe meet with colleagues and talk about what you can move online if you have to, or you may have already done this. Preparing and giving a webinar, be the next person to give one of these. Learning to be a translator or interpreter. It's a profession. It's not an easy one. Teaching another subject or taking on an administrative job. So one thing you can do, and this was something that I felt was important for myself, was to go back and look at my timeline. How did I do all of this? What did I do? What changed? And I start back with when I started. I came to Austria in 1981, when I started teaching, and the various steps, moving into different things, becoming a Cambridge oral examiner. That happened many, many years after I started teaching, but it was a learning process. Giving my first conference presentation was also an absolute learning process. Joining the membership committee of IATEFL, teaching online for the first time in 2014. That was something completely new. Holding the first plenary talk, joining an author team of an international business English course book. And in 2020, I started writing online courses for Language Fuel in New Zealand, and that's something I'm continuing to do. So going back and looking at this is a wonderful way to see how you've grown. It's a positive activity because you are never looking at what didn't work. You're looking at what did I do? Where has it taken me? You might have left something behind, and it doesn't matter. I've stopped being an oral examiner, for example, but it doesn't matter. The time that I did it taught me a great deal, which I still use today. So these are stepping stones in your growth as a teacher. Okay, so what are the things we can do? Well, this is just some of it. Supplementary materials, course books, editing, blogging, as I said, writing curriculum, if you can do that. Testing and assessment, as I said, getting involved in the teacher association or doing teacher training. We've all learned to use new technology, discovering ideas, collaborating, setting up your PLN, translating online conferences, or maybe learning to skateboard. Okay, these are some ideas of things you can do. There's the ELT chat, which is once a week. It's done on Twitter. There's a topic. For example, it could be successful activities in the ELT classroom. And you have only the number of characters you have in Twitter to say, I do ... and you tweet it to the specific hashtag, and then they are part of the chat. Anyone can take part. The ELT Pics, which is a collection of photos taken by teachers for teachers, free to use in your classroom. They are organized in categories. It's no longer being curated, so we don't send any more in, but there are, I think it's 70,000 photos in this collection, which you can use in everything except published material by a third party, but you can use it in class or in your own presentations, and they are wonderful. The No Project, which is training young people to become ambassadors against human slavery and against human trafficking, a very important project. The EFL magazine, which I mentioned, you can try to write, you can do an article, send it in, work on getting yourself published. EFL Talks, as I mentioned, and that's just some of the people that have presented. I don't know what they're up to at this point, but many, many, many people. And it's a great way to do your first presentation, because it's 10 minutes, 10 slides. And you can think to yourself, well, that's not a problem. Let me try it. And after you've done that, you can move on to the next thing. British Council has got loads of free materials online. BBC Learning English is another one. IATEFL, the webinars are free when they are first done. They are then put into archives for members, but anyone can watch the webinars when they are held, and you can just check on their website when the next ones are coming. Simple English videos, as I mentioned, appropriate videos. And Vicki said she started her own company. They have a very large collection. There's grammar, vocabulary, and topics. And we're going to have a look. So as Vicki says, we're in the business of teaching meanings. They don't come from words, they come from context, and video is the natural medium. So why is anyone still trying to teach with just audio? And we're going to see how this works. We're going to have a look at an example. This is on how to make a successful phone call. So I hope everyone can hear it.
So 2 for you, 2 for me, 2 for you. Hi, this is Vicki.
This is Barack Obama.
Barack who?
This is Barack Obama. How are you?
Fine, how are you?
Well, I'm doing great, and I know I'm interrupting you, but I figured you might take my call.
Well, we're a bit busy.
How's your mom doing these days?
Mum's fine. Was there something you wanted?
And one of the things I think is terrific is baseball, you know.
Baseball. So you called to talk about baseball?
Well, you know, I am a big baseball fan, and I grew up in Hawaii. My earliest memories of baseball were actually...
Look, I'm sorry, Barack, but we're a bit busy at the moment.
Is that correct?
Yeah, this isn't a good time.
Well, now, I understand that...
Try calling next week, or next month. We'd love to hear from you then.
Well, I appreciate that. Tell your mom I said hi. You take care of yourself.
You too. Thanks, Barack. Bye. So where were we?
2 for you.
2 for me, 2 for you. 2 for me. Subscribe to our channel to see more of our videos.
And if your organization needs specialized English language training, we make videos for that too.
So get in touch if we can help.
Okay, so when I started using these videos, my evaluation scores from my students at university went from not very good with technology to wonderful technology. I would upload one, give the link on Moodle, and tell my students, this is the homework. And it was something like the difference between borrow and lend, or past tense and present perfect tense. And there are also some worksheets that go along with these, or you can write them. And I would have my students do them. And then some of the vocabulary showed up on their exams, or of course the grammar is there anyway. My students love them. And as you can see, they are short. They're not too complicated. And you get an American and a British accent. With the telephone one, you can look at the captions and have them write their own dialogue for a successful phone call, for example. There are some on greeting visitors, on checking in at an airline, all kinds of topics. So have a look at those. So TED Talks, there's a wonderful TED Talk on trying something new, which it will be in the link so you can watch it at home. But TED Talks are an excellent thing you can use in class or online. Give your students a link, have them look at it, and come back and discuss it. I found a really fascinating one about how the time was set in the United States, why we actually had the time being the same in certain areas and the time zones. And this was due to the railroads. When the railroads started, each town had their own time. So you could leave one town at 12 and arrive in the next town at 11, which made no sense to anyone. So they got together and they decided to actually fix a time. And it led to a wonderful discussion of how we look at time. It was a really fun thing to watch. There's loads and loads of topics, as you can see here. So this is the TED Talk that we're not watching, but that's the link, and I can make the PDFs available if this can be put online or can be sent to people. So something to think about. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. It sounds like a very simple phrase, but for example, if you get locked or stuck in a room and the door seems stuck and you keep pushing the door and you're not getting anywhere, you suddenly discover that you actually have to pull the door and then it opens, or turn the knob in the other direction and it works. When we keep doing the same thing over and over, we'll always get back what we've gotten before. So sometimes we have to break out of that particular pattern and simply try something new in order to experience growth. So this is for you to think about. Is there anything you're going to try out? Any of the areas that we covered, the new methods or subjects, or technology, anything, a new area, stretching out of your style, or working more with your colleagues, or setting up a PLN. And when are you going to do it? You're going to start today, tomorrow, next week. And writing down the first step can be extremely helpful. Tomorrow, I'm going to do this, or next week, I'm going to do this. And once we've done that, that creates something in writing for us, for ourselves, and can get us moving in the right direction. So these are the acknowledgements of where I got everything from. You can see my use of ELT picks throughout. And these are the links, which you will then get. And these are all free. It's something you can use to grow, to use with for yourself, for teacher development, or to use in class. And I have any questions, but I'm going to stop screen sharing in order to be able to see the chat. So this is, thank you for your attention, and a lovely bouquet of flowers growing on the bush from Shelley for everyone. Okay.
Thank you so very much, Marjorie. That was a wonderful talk. Really appreciate that. Thanks for all these great ideas to grow. And now the floor is open for questions. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat box and forwarding your questions to Marjorie. So the first question, a couple of questions were around motivation. How do you motivate yourself to grow professionally? Pursue these all CPD programs.
This question, how do I motivate myself?
Yeah.
To grow professionally.
How teachers can motivate themselves.
I think it's just part of what we do when, sorry. And when we try something and we find that it worked, it's wonderful motivation to keep trying new things. And even if it didn't work, I mean, one of the most important things, I think, is to have rapport with your learners. Rapport means that you understand where they're coming from and you understand their situation as they understand yours. So having to learn a second language helped me enormously to understand where my students were coming from. And whenever I was able to help someone, that motivated me more. I think it's important also, if something doesn't work, to look at why. And this is something very important I learned in a training I did. When we reflect, it's helpful to reflect in third person. So I had a very bad, let's say I had a bad situation in class. I come home and I say, Marjorie had a bad situation. A student told her that she had no idea what she was talking about and was very unpleasant and so on. Now, doing it in third person makes it less emotional for me. I'm not saying I'm saying Marjorie. So it's almost like I'm looking at myself from outside. And then when we plan in first person. So tomorrow I am going to address this issue by ... And this is motivation, which is very, very helpful to use, to do. And we constantly learn. I think when I have a colleague who coaches me. Find somebody who you can go to say, I need help. I think all of us have at least one person. I'm lucky I have several that I can contact and say, I don't know what to do. Does anyone have an idea? And I get motivation from them as well. I hope that answered it. Okay, another question. I can see the chat.
Great. So another question from Iris Dila, Brazil. Are methods and techniques required to be grown professionally?
Sorry, where's the question?
Well, it's on YouTube, and Iris Dila from Brazil. He asked that are methods and techniques required to grow professionally?
I didn't quite understand the question. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay.
He's asking, are methods and techniques required to grow professionally?
No, I'm really sorry. I just didn't quite understand. I'm looking for the question in the chat. It would be easier if I can read it. Can you tell me the time?
It's not in the chat.
It's not in the chat.
Yep.
Ah, okay. So it was about having them watch.
It's about methods and techniques.
Okay. Having them watch a video. Was that the question?
To grow professionally.
Watch it for teachers or for the students?
For teachers.
To get them to watch videos. I think if someone is not motivated to grow professionally, it's very hard to talk them into it. I think we need to look at why somebody doesn't want to grow professionally. Do people just not have time? Do they not have the funds? Do they not have the energy to do it? What else is going on in their lives? There are times when someone says, not right now. I'm not able to do it at the moment. Say, okay, come to me when you feel you are ready. Pushing somebody to do something, I think, is not the way to help them. I think sometimes we simply need to give people space. I don't know if that answers it. I hope so. Okay. Is there anything else?
Yep. Another question from Chandra from India. And
okay.
Chandra asks, do emotions and social skills play important role in teaching and learning?
Does what? Okay, I'm getting a lot of echo. Does what play an important role?
Emotions and social skills.
I'm sorry, it's just echoey. If people could write these in the chat, I could read them because I've got the chat open and I'm getting a lot of echo.
So participants, everyone, could you please write these questions in the chat?
I'm looking to see if there.
Why is this echo?
Yeah, this is the problems we have with. But with students, we have the same thing. So we tell them to repeat it, or we tell them to write it. Okay. I'm just looking to see if there is any other questions. Okay, when you identify student it's meaningful for students. Yes, if we identify their needs, that's very true. Facebook, yeah, and being in touch with students outside of class can be very helpful. It's something that my adult students, I definitely am in touch with them. How to transform growing attitude in comfort zone. The growing part of the comfort zone is actually outside of the comfort zone. So we need to take at least one step out. That's important. We need to move out of that comfort zone in order to start any kind of growth. Take one chance of moving outside the comfort zone. And then we have a chance to begin to grow. And then once you've taken that step, you are already growing, and then you can take a second step. It's kind of like when you learn to do something, a sport, a physical thing. The park near us has put in some adult sport, like a playground. And there's a thing you have to walk on that's very hard to walk on. And my partner did it. And the first day he had real problems. And the second day he realized he needed to walk further to, not in the center, which made it wobble more, but more on the outside. So the second day he was able to do it much better. So trying things out till you get better at it. Okay, there's a question here about teaching grammar inductively. Okay, deductive is when you give the general rule, which is then applied to everything. And inductive is, just a second, I want to give you the correct, absolutely correct. So deductive is top down. You give the rule and then you apply it. And inductive is giving the examples and then coming up with the rule. Sorry, that's what I'm looking at here is confusing me. Deductive is top down. Yes, that's deductive, right? And inductive, giving various examples of something like present perfect and then coming up with, letting the learner work out the rule. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. If you give them lots of sentences in present perfect, I have never been there, I have always liked that, will they come up with the rule? Maybe. Okay. But it's something to try out. Why not? See what your students like. Or do they want the rule of present perfect is used when something is not yet finished, something started in the past and is going on, and so on. Do I believe that a teacher stops being a student when they stop being a teacher? No. I mean, I'm basically retired and I don't think I've stopped being a student. I think I'm continuing to learn. I just think it's part of who we are. I think it is absolutely vital that we continue to learn. And I think that COVID is, as difficult as it's been for many of us, has made us. There's a wonderful video online of a teacher who had to move to Zoom or to online teaching. He's playing the guitar and singing a song about this to I Will Survive. And, you know, teachers were hit as universities. This happened overnight. They had 2 or 3 days to move all of their curriculum online. Incredible. Okay, so many countries, teachers don't receive formal training. They graduate and start teaching. Where should a novice teacher start from? Wow. Oh boy, that is a very good question. I'm not an expert on telling you where to go in a particular country to get the training, but I would at least join a teacher association and ask others how they got training, what worked for them. What works in one country may not work in another country. I mean, I was very surprised the first time I went to Slovenia, for example, which is right across the border from Austria, and the teachers were so quiet. They didn't talk all the time the way the Austrians did. And I thought in Slovenia and the Balkans, it was going to be very loud. So what works for them may not work in Austria. And joining a teacher association or finding colleagues who you think are successful, very important might be to go and observe classes. That could really help. And if those ideas work, I think it's a place to start. Okay, methods and techniques required to grow professionally. That's why is CPD required? Yeah, I really think people do need to do CPD. I think it really helps. The things I've learned at conferences, I learned a wonderful activity about creating stories with children, but I did it with students as well. And it was so simple. You start off by saying, okay, we're going to make a fairy tale. Who's in the fairy tale? And they shout out a princess. And okay, we have a princess. How old is the princess? 18. Okay, so we have an 18-year-old princess. What does she do? She goes into the forest. And then I repeat it. So we have an 18-year-old princess who goes into the forest. And the group creates the story, which I kept repeating. And then at the end, we assigned roles and they acted it out. And I learned that at a conference years ago, never thinking I would actually use it. But it was so much fun that I did it over and over with groups. And it became a free speaking activity. Certain books to teach English. Oh, there are so many. There are so many books out there. I love anything by Penny Orr. I've got loads of books on activities. Then there's the Delta series, which I've written for, which have lots of activities. I like something which combines methods and techniques with the activities. I'm not very analytical as far as just reading an analysis of something and then figuring it out. I like to read the analysis and then see, this is how we put it into practice. I'd have to take a look at my library and maybe send something, but there's lots out there. Emotion, social skills, absolutely. When classes moved online, I have a group that I've been working with for 4 years. We started with a 3-month trial class 4 years ago, and it's continued. And part of it is we simply like each other. We really enjoy getting together. We've missed being face to face, but I bring in the emotions in the online work. And when I started with them, we used Microsoft Teams because of the protocol they need to use from the company. And I didn't have it installed, and I could only see these circles with initials, and it was so difficult for me. And I installed it on my computer, and now I see their faces, and what a difference. I need that. And I think many of us find that this is an important role. It's a person profession. I don't think we're learning in a vacuum. Many students are indifferent to learning, although they know its significance. Yeah, being afraid to speak. Oh boy, I understand this from going through this myself in learning a language. Cooperative learning groups can help, where they're in small groups where you have different levels and the peers are helping other peers. So a student helps another student. And then perhaps calling on that student who has just finally brought out a sentence that everybody said, oh, thank you, that's perfect, can then say it to the group. So I would try out cooperative learning. Going to be in a class, okay. I think our time is actually up. Does anyone have one last question?
Thank you so very much, Marjorie. That was a wonderful talk. I really appreciate that. We were delighted to have you at Teacher Development Webinars. Thank you everyone for your appreciation. A lot of thanks in the chat box. Love the webinar, says Kavitha. Gunal says thank you. Thank you so very much for your presence. So this recording of the webinar will also be available at Teacher Development Webinars YouTube channel. So I would request you to subscribe and share with your colleagues, so they can also benefit from such wonderful thoughts and ideas. I thank you again, Marjorie, for sharing your expertise and time. Really appreciate that. We are also available on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere. So you can follow us for future webinars. I'll take leave. Please be safe. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much for inviting me. It was lovely to speak to you all, and have a wonderful rest of the week and rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.